It's time for the biggest non-league football debate in the country. Search official BOTN and get involved with tonight's show.
Well, welcome to the podcast, the first episode of the non-league debate for the new season. We are recording this at Heybridge Swifts Football Club. Delighted to say that Gary White is the guest today on the podcast, the chairman of Heybridge Swifts. Have also got Charlotte Richardson and Jody Brown back for another season as well. So much to delve into and talk about this year. One of the things I wanted to do on the podcast, though, was just tell everybody a little bit more about us. I'm sure if you're listening, it's one of the things that people will say: who's on, where they come from, what do they do. So my name's Ben, and I've been in commercial radio for a number of years. I'm not sure if it's been successful or unsuccessful, but I love doing podcasts. That's why I do it. I love non-league football and have a ball doing it. And that's really it. That's my story. Now, I'm sure that Charlotte Richardson's story is going to be much more interesting than that.
I've always loved football, watching from a tender age, going to watch Gillingham with my dad, and started working in football pretty much straight away after I graduated, working for the Football Association, working within marketing and communications and media and press. So it took me to Dagenham Football Club, and more recently working freelance at Margate Football Club, which was my real introduction into the non-league game. And the county where I'm from in Kent, we have a thriving non-league community, so it's really opened my eyes up to another side of the game that I really, really enjoy and love. It's really interesting. It's very unpredictable. I'm very fortunate as well that I work at a training facility called K Sports, which is where Absolute United and Dover Athletic train. So that's just kind of another strand that links the non-league into my thought processes, I suppose. So love being involved with Back of the Net and learning more about the non-league, and especially the opportunity to spend time with coaches and managers as well. I find that really insightful, and I love listening to the guys in the debate because I think they give us such an intriguing insight into the world of non-league, because it is nothing like the professional game.
Yeah, it's worth saying as well that Frank Wilson, Jim Cooper will be back on this season. James Cummins as well, part of the furniture here really from last year. They'll be back on the debate, and we get lots of other guests in as well as we go through what we hope will be 40 podcasts for you this season to listen to and to talk about the non-league game. Jody Brown. I mean, most people know Jody Brown when I speak to them. Yeah, a little bit. But obviously this year, people always ask that question whenever we put any show out. I always get a message that says, I love the show, really enjoyed it, but could you please put up on the screen who the non-league guests are, like where they manage now, what they're doing? We get quite a lot of that, and we should really, but this is your opportunity to tell everybody. Jody, what you're up to this season?
First team coach at Dagenham and Redbridge, working alongside Peter Taylor. Great club to be involved with, and a great opportunity for me to learn and develop as a football coach.
And we're recording, we're recording at Heybridge tonight. We are going to get to as many football clubs as we can this season and record the podcast and get people involved in it. You managed here for a period of time and was extremely successful. I
don't know whether I was extremely successful, but two spells I had here. A lot of people forget about the first one. I came in and we made it to the playoffs, lost to Harlow, who eventually went up. I left and went to Grays, and then latterly Welling United, and ended up coming back here when, to be honest, Heybridge had probably had a bit of a setback and weren't in a great place. Wasn't easy when I come back, but then Gary, who's obviously a guest tonight, came on board as chairman, and together we galvanised the football club with the help of many other people. But we turned it around from year-on-year relegation battles to being probably the most covered side in the Isthmian League in terms of national exposure and the various on-field successes. Obviously, the big sort of void in my time here was getting that promotion. I had a couple of playoff defeats, some very, very good cup successes, but personally I would have liked to have got the promotion.
And you said very modestly, if I must say so, that you're not sure if you were extremely successful. I guess the best person to ask would be the person sitting next to me, Gary White. Welcome to the Back of the Net non-league debate.
Hi, Ben. I think I would certainly say that Jody was very successful here. It was a pleasure working with him. I'm not just saying that because he's here, but it was a great experience for me as a relatively new to chairman at the time, and we hit it off very quickly. We were both passionate football men, and Jody really knew what he was clearly, knew what he was doing, and I just created the sort of platform and the environment to let him get on with it and be successful. And I thoroughly enjoyed working together, and it's great to see him back here tonight.
So we've just gone around and done a little bit of a get to know you, as if it's brand new. You're the chairman here at Heybridge Swifts. The season last year that was tainted with maybe some controversy at the end. It was a really successful season. You can't take that away, winning the playoffs, but disappointingly not going up. Explain for anybody that hasn't seen it, maybe for the 100th time for you, why that is.
Well, it was an FA restructuring rule that 7 leagues were feeding 5 divisions, I believe, and there was always going to be 2 clubs that missed out, basically, that won their respective playoffs but didn't achieve sufficient goals per game ratio. So the lowest 2 goals per game clubs, one of which was us, stayed down. But unfortunately, it was obviously we beat Morden in a dramatic playoff final, which was a great achievement for the club and fantastic event. But the next day we were dependent on Cinderford Town beating Yate Town to stay up. Now Cinderford couldn't go up, so they were going into a game knowing that even if they won it, they weren't going to get promoted, even though they were unbeaten in 16 games, facing Yate Town, who could go up and were the home side, and understandably won 3-1. So we do feel a little bit aggrieved about that. It's the way fate sort of dealt us the hand, but we didn't quite get enough points per game. I think another win or another draw or whatever would have put that right. So you could argue that we knew that rule at the start of the season, and it's down to us, and we just have to deal with that and live with it and prove them wrong going forward.
Does it ever cross your mind? Certainly crossed mine from the outside looking in. Why were there extra teams promoted the year before, if this was going to be the eventuality that some teams couldn't go up who actually earned it?
That's
right.
The
year before there was 3 teams went up.
That's true. Yeah.
The following year only 1. Surely if there was a bit of foresight from the league and the FA, they wouldn't have promoted the extra team.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And then the following year, the rightful, deserved promoted team would have got promoted.
Yeah, or at least give us an opportunity to have some sort of super playoff or something like that. It's a massive anticlimax. I've never experienced anything like it in football. From the highs of being here on the Sunday night and having a drink with all the players and the fans, it was fantastic. Then the next day, okay, you're still positive going into that game, because looking at the form for Cinderford, you think, well, you never know, they might go there and win it. But we're never going to win that game. That was never going to happen. It would have been a ridiculous situation.
I even mean from the league and the FA's point of view, could they not have put all the playoffs on the same day?
That's exactly.
So at least you didn't have these dead rubbers.
Yeah.
Like you say, Cinderford, how demotivated must they have been? You wouldn't be surprised if players were away on holiday and it was a nothing game for them. So I think when the FA look back and reflect, they know that between them and the league officials, they got it badly wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
Plenty to talk about on the podcast tonight. We put a tweet out earlier today to get you involved in the show and to get your thoughts on a number of things. We're going to talk about the National League, obviously returned at the weekend, and Jody, you were involved in that. We're going to talk about player holidays during the season, which has been, again, it's reared its head this year and been quite controversial. I'm going to get the opinions of our guests tonight and see what they think about that. Betting companies as sponsors is another topic this evening. Really big news that Bet Victor will be sponsoring all of Step 3 and Step 4 across the country. And Respecting the Badge was the last thing you put out. A few different topics around that, player movements this season from clubs and what we think about that. We're also going to be looking at the National League Team of the Week. As always, they put that out, and we're going to be talking to David from the National League next.
This is the Back of the Net podcast.
So delighted to say that we've got David Richardson on the phone joining us for the first show of the season. Very good evening to you, David.
Evening, Ben.
You must have been a very busy man this weekend with everything in the National League and the South and the North kicking off.
Yeah, it was always a little bit busy on the first Saturday of the weekend. Of course, it hasn't quite completely sort of kicked off yet for us, really, obviously, with the step 3 and 4 still to come. But no, good to have some match reports coming in on Saturday evening and getting some match pages ready for Sunday. Yeah, it was busy as usual, but I think we got there in the end.
What were your highlights looking at the National League first?
Well, it was interesting. Obviously, you always wonder how teams coming down from the Football League are going to get on. And obviously, both Yeovil and Notts County lost. Notts County lost at Eastleigh. Obviously, they have had a really difficult summer with the whole takeover saga, as have Yeovil, which is nearing completion. But obviously, Notts County got theirs over the line a week before the season started, which meant they could start signing players. So they had been under a transfer embargo. But yeah, they were humbled early on at Eastleigh. You wonder how that's going to pan out for Notts County now that they can bring players in. It's usually a case of how quickly they can gel, because effectively they haven't really had a pre-season with their new signings, unlike everyone else in the division. And obviously Yeovil coming down as well. They lost at Barnet. I think Barnet are one that people fancy to be in the promotion hunt this year. I think they underachieved last season, given the squad that they've got there, a very young and talented squad. And I think under Darren Curry, they can put themselves in that promotion picture. So that was two sort of main highlights, really, probably of the weekend. And I think Halifax are worth a mention as well. A great result for Pete Wild in his first game. They only appointed him a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, Ebbsfleet we're down to 10 men after about 9 minutes. But Halifax won that one 4-1. A great start for them and for Pete Wild. It's can be a difficult club to manage, Halifax. I think their fans are expecting, obviously, an ex-Football League club there. So, it'd be interesting to see how that one pans out over the course of the season.
Jody, you were obviously in the National League with Dagenham and Redbridge at the weekend, and David's given his summary of the day. Is that fair?
His summary's fair, yeah, because it's his summary.
No, I mean, is there anyone for you that jumps out that you think you agree that will be, in the race, not in the race? It's very early days, but it's interesting always the first day of the season in any division. Yeah,
my experience being involved in the opening day of the season is it doesn't really tell you a great deal. There's nerves, there's real high adrenaline, real high motivation levels. Some teams have had more settled pre-seasons with better continuity from the players that have stayed on board from the year before. Some haven't, and it's a 46-game season, so I read very little into that opening game. Not just
would you have said lost. That if you won?
Yeah, no, 100%. I would have said exactly the same thing. I've been involved in a lot of season openers and lost some, won some, and it's never really been a gauge of how the season's going to end up. The sides I sort of look at that stand out, I mean, two of them played each other, Solihull and Harrogate. I think there'll be sides that are challenging at the top of the table. I think Fylde will be challenging at the top of the table. I hope that we bounce back from our opening day defeat and get ourselves towards the playoff places. And it's worth mentioning Woking, just for balance, even though they beat us, they've come up. It was their first game back in the division. Alan Dowson has been very successful manager over the past 3 or 4 seasons with Hampton and Richmond, playoffs, promotions, and then Woking immediately getting promoted. He's continued that. He's had a great start, and unfortunately, we lost the game 2-0. But actually, on reflection, when you look back at it, we played pretty well, and there's many, many positives we can take from the game. So yeah, credit to Woking, first game up in the league, same as Torquay, I think, won as well. So the teams that come up gave a good account of themselves. Yeah, worth mentioning that as well. I wanted to ask to get your opinion on that, David. Woking obviously did so well last year, came up, and it was a surprise result really, because they've just come up, and people wondered how they would be back in the National League. Yeah, and they've re-signed a lot of that squad from last year, and I think there's probably a fair amount of question marks over a lot of the squad as to whether they can
play at this level and keep the team up in the National League. They have made some good additions, though. Obviously, Dave Tarpey's one, a striker that you think on his day he can get to 20 goals in this division, you would think, given his history with Maidenhead. But I think by all accounts, Woking at Dagenham, they're a big side, Woking. They've got 4 sort of giant centre-backs who they play in a back 5. And I think Dagenham were undone by 2 set pieces. And that's very much going to be key for Woking this season, really, defending in both boxes for them. In the past, in this division, they've struggled with crosses and set pieces. So I think that's first and foremost what Alan Dawson is trying to address, and clearly on Saturday it worked. But I can't agree more with what Jody said in terms of the opening day. You do get a lot of surprise results, and things don't perhaps pan out as what you might think. You often hear managers saying nowadays, you always look at the league table until sort of 10, 15 games have been played, and then you assess how things might be going for you and what you need to bring in or what you're doing well. So, yeah, plenty of changes to come throughout the season, but a great start for Woking. That's exactly the type of result you want on the opening day.
I want to move on from this, and we'll talk about the team of the day. But Jody, just quickly, a fair assessment there of Woking and a really good result for them. In the dressing room afterwards, what was the mood? Was it real disappointment from the players and the staff?
I think professional footballers are always disappointed when they lose, no matter what's at stake. We were all disappointed. We've obviously spent 5 or 6 weeks preparing to make a good start. But I reiterate, on reflection, we played pretty well. Woking's defenders defended really well. A lot of blocks, a lot of last-ditch clearances. Keepers made a couple of good saves. We've missed a couple of open goals. So, although we were extremely disappointed, when we reflect, if we take the good aspects of that performance into the future, we'll be fine.
We will be speaking to Woking's Max Kretzschmar, who will be coming on to the show very shortly. David, finally, I just want to ask you about the team of the day. You always get a lot of feedback on this from fans when you put it out. I think it's a great thing to do. Talk us through some of the players that stood out at the weekend.
Yeah, perhaps one that we had up front is JJ Hooper for Wrexham. It's been sort of quite well known, really, in the past 2 seasons, the struggles they've had at scoring goals. You sort of feel that had they had a 20-goal striker, they might have won promotion in one of the sort of last 2 seasons. But Brian Hughes has tried to adjust that this season. They've brought in a few strikers, JJ Hooper being one of them. He was obviously at Grimsby, but he was on loan a bit last season at Bromley and did well there. And he started off with goal and assist for Wrexham in their win against Barrow. So that will be a big sort of maybe relief for their fans, possibly, that they've got someone who knows where the goal is, and maybe they can rely on him to get the goals this season. Harry Buseman for Sutton United had a really good game for them up at Hartlepool in their 3-1 win. He's a player who's obviously played in the Football League before, and there's a lot of question marks this season around Sutton, obviously with Paul Doswell moving on, Matt Gray coming in, and you do wonder how much that would affect the club. But they have kept a core of players, the likes of Craig Eastman, Kenny Davis, Collins, the centre half, and their captain. And they've brought in the likes of Omar Bodwell, who's a striker, who's not bad at this level as well. So a great way for them to start the season. We've had quite a lot of stick maybe on Twitter this week over the missing Alfie Pavey for Dover, who scored twice in their win at Chesterfield. Admittedly, that was a bit of an oversight on our part when we were coming up with the team on Saturday evening, but I think we'll put that one down to the first weekend and a bit of rustiness.
You could just say, look, it's tight. We got decisions to make on a Saturday, and you back yourself. Say, look, we have decisions to make. Got to leave some players out, but yeah, obviously a great performance from Alfie. Just moving on to the National League South and the North very quickly. Your thought last year, both of those leagues were so competitive. Some really good teams in there. Are you expecting similar this season?
Yeah, I think so. I think generally when you look at these divisions and the National League as well, it's difficult to pick an outright winner. I think maybe in the South you look at sort of Havant as one you would perhaps expect to win the title, but I mean, again, it's so difficult. You've got Billericay, Chelmsford, all the usual sort of suspects, Concord, although Sammy Moore's moved on to Hemel. And the same goes for the North as well. Some really big clubs in their ex-football league. I think you look at York under Steve Watson and some of the signings that they've made. Steve McNulty was in our National League North team of the day on the weekend. Two really difficult divisions as usual, but like you say, it's great entertainment for us and great to be able to cover these leagues without really knowing what's going to happen each weekend.
Well, like you say, 3 very difficult divisions, very difficult to pick a winner. So my final question to you tonight, as I want it on record on day one, is who's going to win each of those divisions? You can only say one team as well.
National League as well.
Yeah, National League South, North, just 3 title winners.
AFC Fylde, Havant and Waterlooville, and York.
Okay, right. This is obviously on record officially. It's all recorded and documented, and we'll see how you get on as the season progresses. David, thanks for coming on. I know you've got a really busy week this week with the start of steps 3 and 4. So we'll hopefully speak to you next Monday, and we'll get your thoughts on match day 2 in the National Leagues and the start of steps 3 and 4.
Brilliant, great. Thanks, Ben.
This is the Back of the Net podcast.
So I'm delighted to say that Wokin's Max Kretzschmar is on the phone now. Very good evening to you, Max.
Hi, Ben. How are you? Right?
Yeah, really good. And you must be delighted after an opening day win in the National League.
Yeah, no, really good start. When the fixtures came out, it was a away former league side, and they've been pretty settled in the National League last couple of years, Dagenham. So, yeah, it was a tough fixture, but the boys played really well. The manager set us up well and managed to get a really good positive result, 2-0 in the end.
How was it going into pre-season? When you get promoted, obviously there's a great vibe around a team and any club. Was as a player, is there that little bit of unknown as far as the team you're in? You know, how are you going to fare when it all kicks off? How are you actually going to compete and how are you going to do?
Yeah, of course, because a lot of the players we've kept on this season were from last season, so we've still got a core spine that we have in defence and a couple of players midfield and up front, so all the way through the team. So you've always got that familiarity with each other, but you do have maybe doubts or just thoughts about whether you do it at the next level. I mean, a few of our players have played at this level anyway, so that's a positive and done really well. But I think the players we have got who haven't played at this level could have played it before and are looking really strong in pre-season and in that first match now. There's obviously a long way to go. It's only one game, but there's some real positive things coming out from, I think, the whole 11 and the guys who came on the weekend. So, it bodes well for, this busy period we've got coming up. I think we've got 8 matches in the first month. So I think let's see how see where we stand after there, and we'll have a better idea of how we're going to fare this season.
Jody, you want to ask Max a question? I was looking in your direction to see if you wanted to ask him anything after the result on Saturday. I'm not being mean, but
he probably doesn't know who I am. Do you know who I am, Max?
I don't know. Sorry,
but that's all right. Cause
I'm the first team coach at Dagenham.
Well, what did you think of the game then? How did it go?
I thought once we sort of settled, we started quite nervously. Once we started passing it, I thought I've watched the game back and we've analysed it this morning, so we created a lot of opportunities that we would have hoped to have done better from, but
definitely. Yeah. I think the 2 chances in the 6-yard box could have, on another day, changed the game completely.
Yeah, but really, I was really impressed with Manny Parry. I thought I was watching him closely because I've worked with him before and he was always organising, and your back three looks solid. You're a very, very big team, with the exception of you. No, but you are, aren't you? You're a big team. It's going to be hard for teams to deal with set plays. And when the goalkeeper kicks it long, like, I mean, you got a right wing back who's about 6'5", so he can sort of push onto fullbacks and get knockdowns. I think it'll be. I thought you'd do all right anyway. I've seen Alan's teams over the last 3 or 4 years, so I was sure you'd do all right anyway. But I think, with that Moussa Diarra and Guerin and Cook, even Jake Hyde, I think you're going to be hard to defend against from set plays, as we found out.
Yeah, it's definitely one of our strong points. Obviously, we've got quite good delivery as well. Just whether keeping that delivery consistent, and as long as the boys attack the ball in the right way, you're gonna pick up chances. I was just thinking, as soon as we kind of went to a back five midway in the first half, you guys started getting on top a bit more. It's just having that balance of pushing those wing backs on and being aggressive, and it being a 3-5-2 rather than a 5-3-2. So
our fullbacks started getting a lot of the ball, didn't they? When your wing backs dropped in a bit, so we started getting a lot more possession in it, and it sort of swung in our favour, but we couldn't take our chances. One thing I was going to say, you got really, really good support, haven't you, to come to our ground, and your fans really got behind you and created a good atmosphere. So that's what momentum brings after a successful season. Your fans are really enthusiastic, and that will go a long way for you as well. Yeah, I think they were really noisy behind that goal, and it was going to be a tough season for us, definitely. And it was even last season. I think some of the fans last season early on thought we'd come and walk the league by 15 points, and it was never going to be like that. So I think in the end we got over the line, and obviously the fans had a great day out. But again, on Saturday were tremendous, like you said. Yeah. One other question I just want to ask you. We're filming the show from Heybridge Swifts tonight. Have you got any memories of Heybridge Swifts?
Yeah.
I remember. You got a penalty, I believe, Max.
I had 2 penalties in that game, and it's haunted me since. I scored the first one, and then because I think our goalie got sent off in the first minute of the game when I was at Hampton, so it was down to 10 men the whole game, and I think it was 2 or 3 or something like that. And the second penalty, I changed the direction I went to last time, and the keeper saved it. Unfortunately, we went out, but. I know it was for a hat-trick as well, which has got quite annoying, but one of those.
So, Max, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions, because I know that if I asked you about what your aspirations are for the season, or where you think you're going to finish, I know that the kind of answers that we usually get, and why wouldn't you, by saying it very diplomatically. So I've got I've got 4 questions for you, and you can only give one answer. It's just one word, so there's no other thing that you can do. I'm going to start by asking you, Love Island or Line of Duty? What kind of a man are you?
Oh God, I feel embarrassed
to pick. I know where you're going with this
Island.
now.
Yeah. No, Love Island. I've been pestered by my girlfriend to watch Line of Duty. I just haven't done it.
I'm going to do 5 questions. Are you a burger man or a pizza man if you had to choose?
Burger.
Good man. Position that you think Woking can finish in the league this season?
12th.
Good prediction. What's more important to you or the team this year, FA Cup or League?
League.
And how many goals do you think you can get this season in the National League?
14.
There we go.
Very precise.
Limit to just one answer, and you get something really constructive. Brilliant. Well, we wish you every success in the National League this season. I really hope it goes well for yourself and for Woking. It's great to see a club like Woking back in the National League, and I'm sure with your support you can do really well. Thanks, Max, for coming on the podcast tonight.
Thank you, guys. Cheers. Have a good one.
All the best, Max.
This is the Back of the Net podcast, the home of non-league football.
So welcome back to the Back of the Net podcast, the non-league debate. It's the first episode of the season. I'm delighted to say that all season we'll be going to different football clubs and recording the show. We want you to get involved. You can get involved across social media. It's official BOTN on Twitter, which is really the home of non-league football. One of the topics we wanted to talk about tonight, I say we wanted to talk about, this. This was one of the ones that I'd scribbled down earlier on. Player holidays during the season. There's been a lot said by managers and staff and on social media about this year. I'm sure it's something that comes up every summer. And lots of players at this level of football in non-league take holidays during pre-season, some during the season. And there's a couple of clubs that their players have got weddings and got things to go to in August when the season's actually started. Where do we stand on this? Charlotte, I'll start with you.
I think it's a really interesting one, and it does sort of depend upon the level of the club, I think, as well. So with the overview that David was giving about the National League, I thought it was quite interesting, the dynamic he picked up of the Football League clubs coming down to this level now. I think non-league is about as professional as it has ever been and as competitive as it's ever been, which makes pre-season more important than ever. I think if you're looking at the National League and the level that Jody coaches at, you wouldn't get a player, that level of professionalism. It just wouldn't happen. Yet, at Margate, the Ishmael League and around it, it's a genuine issue that a manager has to consider. I certainly know it's something that happens quite frequently. And it differs as well because obviously competing at that level, it's not a person's full-time job. So quite a lot of non-league footballers tend to have professions in teaching or, public services where gaining holiday isn't necessarily the most flexible or easy thing to do. So I think all in all, you'd be really scratching your head a little bit beyond August if players are taking, stag do's in Vegas or whatever. But I suppose it really depends upon a manager, but it's never going to be ideal. Never going to be ideal.
So if you're a footballer at this level, a lot of players, not all players, but a lot of players, obviously younger players that are wanting to make their way in the game and move on and play in the Football League. So if I'm a footballer and I'm 20, 21 years old and I think that I can play in the Football League and make a living out of this, when pre-season comes around, you have to be there. And there's no excuses. All season you'd say, well, this is where I've got to be. And if I need to take a holiday or something's happening, I've got to play for this football club because it's what I want to do. And it's in me. It's a soul passion. You see all the clips about people like Wayne Rooney and David Beckham. It's all they did. They'd never let anything get in the way. It's a competitive world. A young, aspiring person wanting to get in the Football League. Surely there's no excuse to take holiday in the football season.
No, there is no excuse. And if you look at the players that do progress, that do climb the pyramid, they're the boys who don't miss training, who don't go on holiday, who don't go to weddings, who don't go away on stag do's, who don't miss FA Cup games, who don't look at the calendar at the start of the season and go, oh, we'll be out the FA Cup by that week, so I'll book that away, and then find you're not out the FA Cup and then miss the biggest game in the club's history, things like that. I've always found it a really, really difficult situation to be in as a manager because I'm as committed as I could possibly be when I was in part-time management, to the point where it became bigger than my job away from football. And even to the point where it becomes bigger than your family, rightly or wrongly. You miss family weddings, you miss birthday parties, you miss all kinds of things. Christenings, holidays. Never had a holiday in a football season in 15 years. So when I see people doing it, I can only feel that it's a lack of commitment. And I don't really want people with a lack of commitment around me. But to be balanced, to give a balanced opinion, if you're not paying people during the summer, then their argument will always be, why should I give you 6 weeks of my life for nothing? And the people who say that are generally the players that are big fish in little ponds. So they stay in and around the level that they're comfortable in. They'll get a different club every year or every 18 months. They'll score goals. They'll maybe win promotions. And then you scratch your head and you think, hang on, he got promoted last year and he's left that club and dropped back down a division to play in the league he won last year. And that's because they don't want the commitment, and that's a life choice. They want to play at a level where they find it comfortable, where they can have holidays, where they can miss training, and managers let them get away with it. But what I would say is you won't ever reach your potential, and the club will never reach its potential whilst you've got that kind of culture.
If you are a player and you want to get in touch, @officialBOTN on Twitter, let us know your thoughts. Is it right us saying this? We've all been quite critical of the fact that players take holidays during the season, maybe a different view, I'm not sure, of Gary, the Heybridge Swifts chairman. The chairman's view, what would you say?
It's an interesting one because we had a game on Saturday and we had, I think, 6 or 7 players out for similar sort of reasons, weddings, stags, that sort of stuff. I take a similar view, I think, to Jody. If it's a player that just wants to play in their comfort zone and not necessarily progress any higher, then that is the sort of thing that they'll do. I never played at that sort of level myself, so I don't necessarily understand that commitment. But I do understand also the fact that if they work in education or they're married to someone who's in education, they're limited as to when they can take holiday time. You do assume that players look after themselves as well, though. If they do go away, they'll still keep their fitness levels up and not come back totally unfit. You do expect that as a minimum, but I can see both sides of it. But as a chairman, I mean, you look for value for money, obviously, with players, and it is a big commitment to play even at step 4 level or any of that sort of level. It's a lot of time. And you want to make it as enjoyable as possible. You don't want people to be missing games or missing training. If they're enjoying their football and the training's right, then they won't want to miss it anyway. Yeah, okay, there might be a family requirement, something like that, or a family emergency that happens from time to time. But taking Jody's commitment, I experienced that at first hand. I remember when his second daughter was born. He kept it very quiet the next day. She was born on a Friday night. We had a big cup game the next day, and you insisted that no one knew until after the game. Just wanted to stay focused on the game. So, huge commitment and a great example he set there.
I think it comes down to sacrifice, doesn't it? What are you willing as an individual to put into a football club? And for chairmen and workers and volunteers and so on, that holiday never really comes about. I think more and more, especially this season, it doesn't feel like there's a definitive end from one season to the other. So even when I went on holiday, the laptop comes with me, the phone comes with me, and I'm putting press releases out about signing players because it doesn't really stop. And I think the average listener and supporter, someone that doesn't play football and hasn't, would do anything to be paid to play football or to compete in step 3 and 4. And I think they would quite willingly give up a holiday or 2 weeks abroad to be able to play football at a competitive level. And certainly the point you make with the younger professionals now, I think non-league is becoming more and more of a hotbed for young talent, and those guys are driven and ambitious, like Jody says, will become more successful, and along the way they will make sacrifices such as all-inclusive holidays.
In the season, are we saying that we've debated the pre-season and that's the period that we've just come out of in many of these leagues, but in the season and during the real fixtures, is there no excuse at all? If at any level, if it's in the season, and you put your hand up and say, I'm not available this Saturday because my mate's getting married, is that any excuse?
Look, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to move on from my position at Heybridge, because we played Horsham away in the FA Cup. I felt as though we could emulate what we did the year before. We were only 2 more games away from getting to the first round again. We went to Horsham. Obviously, we weren't to know that Horsham were going to end up getting promoted and being a real force in that league. But we went there missing 2 centre-backs and, non-football related reasons. So I was extremely disappointed. And as Charlotte said at the start, you get to a certain level, you don't have to deal with that. You know when you turn up to training how many players you're going to have there, what you can work on, what you can't work on. And when you're planning your preparation for a game, you're not having to consider people's work schedules, family schedules, holiday schedules. So that makes a big difference. But you do have to be balanced on these things. And, players that are earning £20 a week, how much commitment are they going to give? I'll go back and say I've had players that were earning £20 a week who are now professional footballers. And they gave commitment. But then there's other players who might look at it and think, I've got no aspirations to be a professional, or I'm not good enough to be professional. And they treat that 20, 30, 40, £50 a week as what it is, petrol money. So they still go away on holiday. They still have their social lives. It becomes a problem when the player sort of comes back from those situations and expects to be treated like they never went away. So, a player will go away, a good player, they'll come back and you don't put them back in the side, and they're knocking on your door as a manager straight away and saying, why aren't I playing? Well, you haven't been here for the last 2 games. I've even had it where they want to know why they weren't paid for whilst they were away. And you try and explain, if you don't go to work, you don't get paid. You know, this isn't a situation where you get sick pay and holiday pay and et cetera, et cetera. If you want to treat it like a hobby, then you'll be paid like it's a hobby. But yeah, it's a big grey area, the pre-season, where we tend, at steps 3 and 4, you tend not to pay the players during that period, which I agree with. But then it is pretty hard to ask for their full commitment during those 6 weeks.
Yeah, really interesting topic, this one. Gary, I'm going to give you the word on this. In season, as a chairman, would you expect your manager to be coming to you and saying, look, a player wants to, we're not going to have one of our best players because he's going off on holiday?
No, not at all. I mean, after that Horsham game last season, I mean, that may have cost us 50,000, 100,000 quid getting knocked out of the FA Cup. That may have been the reality of the situation. We'll never know. I'll give you an example of commitment as well. I mean, we mentioned this guy earlier on, Dave Tarpey, who I think used to play for Maidenhead. Obviously, when they were in the National South, and they played an away game up at AFC Fylde, who were also in that division at the time, and so they were part-time. You know, he went up there, scored 4 goals. I think they drew 4, or he scored all 4. Got a 5-hour coach journey back, and he had to be in work the next day at 6:30 in the morning, and he made it. You know, 6 months later, he got a pro contract. You know, there's something in that. You know, the guy's commitment was unbelievable to do something like that. So,
I mean, we had players here, didn't we? Like Jack Barham. He was earning next to nothing, never missed anything. He's now a pro at Barnet.
That's right.
Reece Grant was on next to nothing. Used to get the train and the bus to get here to training from London. I think he was earning £30 or £40 a week.
His wife went into labour once, and his girlfriend, and had a child while the game was going on, and he scored 2 goals and then rushed off.
Never missed anything. He's now a pro at Dagenham and Redbridge. Joan Luque came in from Spain. We put him on £30 a week. Yeah. He left his whole family in Spain.
Superb
he lived in a house share. He got a pro deal at Lincoln. Never missed anything. So there's a lot of, I can only speak to the ones I've been involved in, but there's a lot of examples of players that were earning hardly nothing but gave you professional level commitment, and they're now professional football players. So the trend and the illustration of what commitment can bring you is there for all to see.
I think there's another argument to be had as well, particularly for sort of National League South, North and underneath. You know, these players, like you say, they can be travelling to Bath from Kent on a Tuesday evening and they're up at 6 a.m. So I guess there is an argument to be said, look, I want my 2 weeks off in the pre-season. Okay, I'm going to miss a handful of games or getting 60 minutes here and there, but you will get my commitment later on. And sometimes I do think that is potentially not undervalued, but is another challenge that a non-league player who works full-time has to undertake. So there is that argument, and I guess a balance for a manager and coaching staff to think, like, do I be a bit more lenient when I can before the real stuff starts? Because you know, it's a long old season, and everyone does need a break.
Yeah,
Cool.
No, you go, Jody.
I was just going to say, I think that is something that's completely undervalued by all spectators from slightly outside of the bubble of non-league football, the commitment that these boys do give. So you sit in the stand on a Saturday and moan your head off and be negative towards people, but they were out training Tuesday night and Thursday night in sub-zero temperatures on some old AstroTurf under half a light, getting in at 12 o'clock at night, getting up and going to work the next day to prepare for that game that you turn up to moan at and say that the boys aren't trying. I don't think there's anyone in non-league football who turns up Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday who isn't trying, because it is a huge commitment. Charlotte's exactly right. When you have to pick yourself up and go to work on Friday morning after you've trained Thursday night and stuff like that, it's a massive commitment. So I don't question their commitment, I just question their ambition. Players who go away on holiday and miss big chunks of seasons and pre-seasons obviously aren't that ambitious, and that's their right.
Interesting topic that I think we'll discuss more as the season goes along, and I'm sure in every sport it's exactly the same. The dedication that you give, you're right, you're going to be more successful if you give that. Let us know your thoughts as well. It leads us nicely actually into the topic that we're going to discuss next, which is respecting the badge in non-league.
Get involved with the debate. Tweet at official BOTN to have your say. The home of non-league football.
So respecting the badge in non-league football, this has kind of come from the Premier League this summer, and we've seen the likes of Paul Pogba and his statements across social media, albeit it looks at this moment in time that he's going to be staying at Manchester United. There's other examples as well of players that perhaps that want their moves. Romelu Lukaku at Manchester United was an interesting one. He put out, I think, the team's sprint stats across social media at the weekend, and he's obviously trying to drive the move away. We could talk about various examples in the Premier League and the Football League. Coming down to non-league football, we've seen quite a lot on social media this summer. There's been a few instances of players that have perhaps committed to clubs and then done a U-turn and swerved, and when they've been announced by clubs as well on social media, we won't name names. Is that respecting the badge?
Me? I don't think you can really respect the badge of a club until you've been there for a period of time. I think it's all a lot of false rubbish. When players, win, lose or draw, I'll thank you to the fans, great to have you there. Oh, love the club, hashtag forever Swifts, or hashtag come on you daggers, or whatever. Because, they're the same people that, when they're not in the public eye, will slate the club. It's the nature of football. You watch the very top, they're all just trained animals who give the same boring interviews, never tell the truth about anything, and you never find out about the real person. And it's filtered down to non-league because of social media, and you've got players who play for 5 clubs a year and tweet like they love each one of those 5 clubs. It's absolute nonsense. I've been involved with a number of football clubs in my career, but the only one that I was involved, well, maybe 2 long enough to honestly say, I love the club, and that was Heybridge, and probably my first club, Tiptree United, who are no longer. Apart from that, you can't build an affiliation and a love for a football club over 6 weeks. It's utter nonsense, and a lot of these non-league players that are on Twitter pretending they love clubs and then move for an extra 20 quid, they didn't love the club, and thanking the fans, it's just nonsense.
But if there's not love for clubs, which according to Jody there isn't any love for clubs, which is it's a fair view.
No, not any love for the club. I said you've got to be at a club for a long enough period of time to grow an affinity for that club. So, for instance, the club we're at now, Harrison Chatting, he's played probably over 100 games for the club, so I would expect he would have an emotional connection with the club. But some of the players Heybridge had last year who aren't here anymore, who played about 20 games for the club, if they're tweeting out, I loved my time at Heybridge and I hold them dearly in my heart, it's nonsense. It's utter nonsense. And when I read it, I laugh.
But if there's not, if and that's a fair view, but if there's not that love for the club, should there be respect for a club? When you look at non-league, you only have to look around a club like Heybridge that we're at tonight and recording the show from. The people that volunteer at the club, the people that give up their time and the effort of selling programmes, putting the programmes together, the people that work in the clubhouse, the people that do the ground. There are so many people in non-league especially that give up their time for a football club. And when players come and play for however long, there should be a real level of respect.
Non-league football, and in the short time that I've really taken an interest in it, the landscape, I think, has probably changed in terms of the way that the leagues have professionalised, puts more and more focus on results driven, whereas maybe in the past non-league football was kind of community driven. It was just the place where you knew everyone, it was very friendly, win or lose, you'd be at the bar afterwards having a beer. But alongside the points we've made already, there's a lot of young players dropping out from the programme, using it as a platform to bounce back, and when you have that, somehow, these clubs do become stepping stones, and it is a ruthless business. I know of players that I've spoken to who, on the flip side, have been promised things by managers and then all of a sudden get dropped like a ton of bricks. It can be a ruthless game, and sometimes, there's parts of it that aren't great. But I think if you build a good culture around a football club, you command more respect and loyalty. And certainly, I work in PR and marketing, so I can exactly understand where Jodie's coming from, and we do it. We big up certain signings and, certain initiatives and stuff like that. But there can be examples when it's a good thing. And at Margate, we have tried to build a culture, and I think an example of where that's worked is last season we had Cadell Daniel on loan from Dover. Wasn't necessarily getting game time there, came to Margate with one objective to play football with a smile on his face. We were in a relegation battle. It was a perfect match-in. Cadell's now signed for Margate, and I think that is because there is an affinity and a respect for the club, but also an understanding that he's an extremely talented player, and we might play a role in pushing him back up to the National League. Culture is a really important thing, and it comes from the top down, and I'm sure in your experiences as a chairman you've set that out, and the tone that you want your football club to.
I think you're absolutely right, Charlotte. I mean, you want people to enjoy their time here, players, however short that may be, and there's a lot of time they spend in and around the stadium, training, that sort of stuff. 90 minutes is only a small part of their weekly activities, so you want the place to be friendly, and not just for players but for fans as well. So you've just got to try and create that environment. There's only so much loyalty you're going to get, because it is a very competitive market. There's managers much more transient, if you like, as a workforce these days, and inevitably they're going to take players with them, and particularly step 4, if you have a particularly good season, your players are going to be in demand. There's no question.
With cup competitions like FA Cups, they dictate so much of budget, don't they? So you can maybe forecast that you're going to do so well in a competition, but if that dries up and then money dries up, you have to be quite ruthless cutting people out, and it's a two-way thing. If you're a player, I suppose you can think, well, I'm on a non-contract, they can show me the door at any point. Lo and behold, if I'm doing quite well and scoring a lot of goals or keeping clean sheets, and I can make a move, or
it's interesting.
It's quite complex, and I think sometimes maybe with social media it makes it look slightly different to what it is. Sometimes social media can be a bit of a smoky mirror.
Yeah, I think that has probably caused more problems than benefits over the years. You just didn't have this 10, 20 years ago. No such thing. I mean, but now obviously a player can put a message out. He has one bad game and puts a little sort of come and get me message out there, and
it's another layer of it all as well from a manager's point of view.
What about, for example, because the topic was loving the badge, right? So I've got no issue with
respecting the badge.
Respecting the badge. I've got no issue with being ambitious and trying to get a move higher up off the back of how well you've done during your time at the club you're at. What about when you see these things where players come on social media and question managers' decisions? That's not respecting the badge. When players go on social media and question, I don't know, if they feel they've been underpaid, that's not respecting the badge. These are personal issues, and you bring the club into question publicly. I've probably a fault of mine in my career has been being honest. And sometimes controversially honest, but I know that I've been honest. So I haven't ever disrespected a badge of a club that I've worked for. I've only spoke the truth, and I know that. But some of these things I see totally disrespect clubs. And I see players doing it, and it's not nice. Where I know they're trying to promote themselves, but at the same time they're undermining the football club that has helped them get to where they potentially want to get. So I don't like it. And it's not just social media, it's word of mouth as well. And I think, if you really do care about a club, it will show in the way you're committed to that club and the way you behave and the way you speak about that club after you've left. Because there's nothing wrong with leaving, but there's a right way and probably a wrong way to do it.
The thing that cringes me sometimes after a game, you might see a player tweet something like disappointing result, but nice to get on the team sheet, nice to get on the goal sheet or something, or score a goal, or whatever. And I'm like, I don't get that. Yeah, if you've lost, there's nothing to celebrate. I don't.
Standard non-league tweet now is gutted to lose 4-1, pleased to get an assist, thanks to all the travelling fans. Hashtag Forever Swifts.
or we go again Tuesday.
Yeah, or we go again. And it's, listen, I think social media is brilliant for interaction, but it's also become so false and so much about self-promotion. Some clubs use it really well, some players use it really well, some clubs use it badly, and some players use it badly.
And maybe as a tool of promotion, it is partly to a factor in why you don't necessarily see club legends like you used to anymore. Players accumulating 100, 150 odd appearances for clubs, because now players are so accessible. I mean, it is even a means of tapping up, isn't it? Sending someone a direct message and finding out, like...
Have you been involved in that? tapping players
certainly
up
not.
On behalf of your club? Have you, Gary?
No, of course not.
Ben, in
no
your
tapping
role
up,
at Heybridge, are you sure?
That's not
But again, though, it could genuinely be a consideration if you're a player thinking, right, I want a good profile, I really want to push on, and you look at how your club, interacts on social media, and again, there's nothing worse than going online and seeing a club give match report updates that are really unprofessional and cringy, or, and I've definitely encountered that. I can't really think of names to call to hand, but like certainly at Margate, we would never say something derogatory about an opposition player. We'd report it how we see it, but we've been on the end of stuff where what club was it? I really wish I could remember, but I felt like I wanted to find whoever ran the Twitter feed, because it just was unprofessional and unfair, and it certainly didn't show any respect for the club I work at. This
is the part of the podcast where we've been going for a little while tonight, and when you do any sort of activity, you get a little bit more tired and you kind of open up a little bit more. So this is probably the most honest part of the podcast. So all I'm saying is, if you haven't got an hour to listen to it each week, then maybe just skip towards the last 20 minutes. I'm going to go back to the players respecting the badge. That's something I wanted to mention. But we were just talking about social media and its use. I feel like we need to get a few moans out now. Charlotte, you started to do that, so it's fine. We can come back to you. One of the things I've hated all summer is, and this is really controversial, and we've got Gary here, who's a chairman of a football club, so we'll get his opinion. For me, pre-season is about the team getting fit, tactic, shape, whatever you want to describe it as, Jody, as nothing else. And as a fan of a football team, I want to support my club when it kicks off. I support Reading, and it kicked off at 3:00 on Saturday afternoon against Sheffield Wednesday, albeit a not a very good result. That's when I want to hear about my football club for a whole season, because it goes on forever. It's a long old season, and you follow the results every match day, and it's tough, and there's match of the day and everything else. I don't want to support my club on the 30th of the sort of 28th of June or whatever it is. Clubs this year in non-league, and I know the argument here is going to be money, but the amount of tweets out about friendlies, begging fans to come, 3 or 4 tweets over a few day period. Some clubs have played about 8 friendlies. They've played half a season already.
Some have played about 15, I think you'll find. I think 8's a sensible number.
I don't have a problem with clubs trying to obviously market themselves, build anticipation for the season, inviting people to come and watch their games, because ultimately income generation for non-league football clubs is really important. I agree with you around the point of the coverage of pre-season friendlies. I think it's felt like it's turned a little bit excessive this summer, and I say that having freelance work with Margate, I'll be open and honest about that. I work for them and I look after their communication channels, and there's been this kind of pressure to report it, and I don't agree with it. I don't think it's particularly respectful sometimes to your opponents. Certainly, for Margate, we've had a couple of games where I think we were 5-0 up within half an hour, and I don't think it's right to be tweeting every goal. I would much rather say, here's a preview, here's the halftime score, and here's the full-time score. I think the sort of 90-minute, step by step, it's just not really productive, and I think also it can, pre-season doesn't really tell the story. Margate are unbeaten, it's brilliant, but that doesn't necessarily mean come Saturday it's a written result against Brightlingsea. But because there's been this incessant commentary of everything, I don't know, maybe it's building some pressure that wasn't there in the past.
Some clubs actually put obviously it's great during the season when you get updates. A lot of clubs now have great social medias, all the images with the players, goals, updates. Some clubs even go as far as if there's a free kick or if there's a shot, and they'll put shot on there and a little line for anyone that can't make it. It's brilliant. But minute by minute in pre-season, surely is overkill. Surely.
No. It's whatever you want to do. If that's your strategy to engage with your support base, then there's nothing wrong with it. If that's your strategy to make your club look maybe better than what it is, to build expectation, it's fine. I think the people within football know that the results aren't massively important. It's more about the performance and the conditioning, like you said. But it comes from the very top now. Like when I was growing up, you didn't see pre-season games on television. Now you can watch, like, people are celebrating Tottenham winning the Ice Valley Water Cup the other day.
To be fair, though, to Tottenham, that's the only thing they're ever going to win. One trophy in 20 years.
But generally, the very top level filters down,
Of course,
more and more pre-season coverage from the very top level is given to us on television now. I watched Chelsea against Wolfsburg the other day. What value was that game? There was about 14 substitutions made, and it ended up like a basketball match, 5-3 end to end. Well, it has no bearing on the season, I don't think. But as a supporter of Chelsea, I was still interested to watch it, and I think if Heybridge played a pre-season game and put a live stream on Twitter or YouTube, I think people would watch it. And I don't worry too much about what other clubs put on their Twitter, and I don't think they worry too much about what clubs I've been involved with put on theirs. I think it's just all about building expectation, building interest, and if you want to use pre-season games for that, then fair play to you.
I guess as a chairman, the money in pre-season is the thing that you think about.
Yeah, I mean, it does help. I mean, we had a reasonable crowd on Saturday, and we had a decent take over the bar and that sort of stuff. But what was more important was what we learnt from the 3-0 defeat. The other games we'd won quite easily. And I was sort of going around saying to people, we haven't lost in 25 pre-season games or whatever it was. But we probably learnt more from that 3-0 defeat than from the other victories. So it was a good workout. So.
Just going back for a moment to respecting the badge, which is where we originally started, and we mentioned social media. I guess one of the questions I had for you, Jody, was as a manager, can you control it now? Can you have any sort of, if I was a manager, which I probably will never be, I've done my level 2, but I think that's about as far as I'm going to go.
That's more than a lot of managers.
You said it, not me. But if I was a manager, I would want that, and I'm not a control freak, but I would want that control of saying, look, if you're going to disrespect the badge, disrespect the club on social media, then you're not going to play. Is that too tough now because you'd end up with no players?
No. I think I always try to instill a culture within clubs I've managed that every sort of word spoken publicly was always positive about what we were trying to do. I would never have taken kindly to seeing a player go online to question a substitution or bring the club into disrepute regarding anything that they were unhappy with. It would always be something that should have been dealt with behind closed doors. Inevitably, it does happen occasionally, but it comes from the culture. And then where I am now, where you've got a manager as experienced as Peter Taylor, and from the levels he's worked at, I don't think any of the players would even dare to go on social media and write something negative about him or the club. So I really do think it just comes from the top, and I think if the manager conducts himself right publicly, the players are expected to follow. I mean, you look at some clubs in the lower levels of non-league football, some of their managers do their team talks on Twitter. Some of them do their debriefs after the game on Twitter. Some of them attack the other clubs on Twitter. So what on earth do they expect their players to do? It comes from the top. Your chairman, your board, your management. They have to. Social media is brilliant. It's got positives, but if it's not used properly, it becomes a massive negative, and that has to come from the top.
It's a really interesting topic, and I know it's going to rear its head again because social media is such a part of the non-league game. We've got one more thing to talk about tonight. Betting companies as sponsors. We're going to do it after this.
Thanks for downloading the Back of the Net Football Podcast. For more non-league football content, search Back of the Net on YouTube.
Gary, you just mentioned, whilst that jingle was playing, that you just received a newsletter on your phone about Herne Bay Football Club.
That's right, yeah. I was just saying to Jody, we played there 2 years ago in a pre-season friendly, and I've been on their mailing list ever since, and I've got to say, it's a superb little newsletter, very good. I'm a closet Herne Bay fan these days.
I had the same thing actually. Went to see Reading play at Yeovil, and the only way to get tickets for this game, it was one of the grounds as a Reading fan that you wanted to go to. They just made their way up, and they were in. I think it was a league game. They'd gone up to the Championship, and the only way to get a ticket was to actually get in the Yeovil end. I'd left it a little bit late, so I bought tickets in the Yeovil end and had to sign up to be a member. And now I am a loyal Yeovil FC member. I get emails on a monthly basis saying, "Dear Mr. Eltham, just to let you know, the fixtures list is out, and we've got seats available for this game." So I keep up to date with Yeovil. Yeah, interesting fact on the. You get interesting facts on the podcast. Going to do that for you every week. Right, last topic tonight is all about betting companies as sponsors. Sky Bet sponsor the Championship, League One and League Two. Big news this season was that BetVictor will be sponsoring all of Step 3 and Step 4. Opinions on that? It's divided opinion, it's fair to say, on social media. In fact, I think we'd probably go a bit further in saying that a lot of people are against the idea, say it's morally wrong. How can players and management staff not be able to bet on games, and the company that's sponsoring the league is a betting company? What are your thoughts?
It's completely unethical in that sense. You know, the Football Association has clamped down not only in the professional game but in the non-league game, and club secretaries at every club that we cover are given strict instructions to tell players and managers not to bet on games. Those same managers and players are participating in a league where the headline sponsor is a betting company. It's quite jarring. I know in my role how difficult it is to get sponsors into football clubs. So I can understand why the league has accepted what I imagine is quite a lucrative deal. If you're going to do that, I think you have to consider the moral implications and where the league then wants to position itself in terms of educating players. Because as well, underline this, betting is crippling. It can lead to addiction. It can lead people to really, really dark places. So what sits uncomfortably with me is where's the sponsorship money going? Is it developing the league? Is it supporting elements of community outreach? I'm not entirely sure. I was slightly disappointed, but I do again sympathise with the fact that money is hard to come by, and if you get a sponsor wanting to give you a big lump sum, arguably for the Isthmian League that has tilted the scales, and money talks.
Just to point out, it's the sponsor, if you're not sure how this level of football that we're talking about works, it's the leagues that are directly underneath the National League, the National League North and the National League South. They're steps 3 and 4 of the English pyramid, and that covers the Isthmian Leagues, the Northern League and the Southern League, and that basically covers the whole of the country, and BetVictor will be the sponsor for all of those leagues.
Yeah, I think we're all around this table, we're all sensible enough to understand the financial implications, and that the league need substantial backing to do their job well. Charlotte touches on the moral implications. Would you have a very successful drug dealer sponsor your league? I don't think you would. Cigarette companies were banned from sponsoring sporting events in early 2000. If you remember, they sponsored all the snooker events, all the motor racing events, some football events. They were banned because of the moral implications to have their branding all over products, allowing people to perceive smoking as positive. So if you put betting companies, and let's look at the Premier League, I think there's about 12 teams sponsored by betting companies. If you plaster that all over football, what are young people seeing all the time? They're seeing about betting. It's a huge problem, believe me, it's a huge problem what people don't recognise. All the young footballers bet and gamble. Lots of them gamble on football wrongly, and some get found out. But they bet on horses, they bet on things they don't know anything about, and some people are more vulnerable than others and end up in massive, massive trouble. I know people with severe gambling addictions that it's ruined their lives. Do you think it's sensible for people fighting addictions to walk into their football club on a Saturday afternoon, which is a good, healthy lifestyle, a sensible hobby, a sensible pastime, and have to put a jumper on in the warm-up that reminds them of gambling? I think it was immoral to accept that backing. I understand the financial implications and the reasons they would do it, but where do you draw the boundaries? Like, I know you sort of smile when I say it, but if a drug dealer turns around and says, "I'll give you £1 million to have my name on the Isthmian League shirts this year," are you going to let him?
It's a good argument. I guess a good argument.
As well, the thing that just doesn't sit right with me is that I think there will inevitably be a spike, because it's such an area of focus for the Football Association, clamping down on it. We've seen high-profile cases with the likes of Paul Scholes and others, because Paul Scholes obviously is a shareholder